I'm Marcus Coward, and this is Wake Up New Bedford. I'm here with Wally Williams, principal of Voch-Tech. Wally, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So we're here for part two. Hopefully you watched part one, where we've gotten a little bit more of a background on who Wally is, his journey of being an educator, how he became principal of Voch. And so right now, I'm really interested to ask him what the current climate is in the school, some of the stresses that the administration, but also teachers deal with, and maybe some of his thoughts on the school committee and things and ideas that he's interested in hopefully seeing done. But my first question I want to ask you is, there are the core classes of being math, social studies, science, and English, okay? And when I was in high school, there was a real interest in coding and STEM, okay? And now it's even transformed into STEAM, you know, adding arts. Having said all that, and even in Nativity, which is a middle school, for those who don't know, they even teach civics there, okay? What class that you've noticed isn't really being taught in a lot of these places that you would want to add, and why?
So I'm grateful that we teach a civics class at New Bedford Voch for the last 4 years, and in African American Studies.
That's great.
For the last 4 years,
Okay.
yes, it goes well. The kids love it. What I would love to see, I would love to see a financial literacy program.
Thank you. Someone finally said it.
Yes.
Okay, talk about it.
It absolutely needs to happen. Our youngsters are leaving high school without any sort of knowledge on, maybe you don't need to balance a checkbook, but you may need to balance your accounts. Understanding how to budget from month to month to be able to pay bills and organize your life around that, and stocks and bonds and basic things like that that sometimes you don't learn about until you're hit in the face with it as an adult, or you happen to be lucky enough to be in an economics class in college, if you go to college. Now, I work at a vocational school, so not every one of my students goes to college, which amplifies the need for them to have a financial literacy course before they leave. So my vision someday when we can integrate financial literacy into New Bedford Voch-Tech would be for every single student to be able to go through a financial literacy course, preferably a whole year course, and so that way we can say by the time they graduate, every student from New Bedford Voch-Tech graduates with proficiency in their financial literacy class, and maybe has left with having invested in 1 or 2 stocks.
Yes.
As a way to
That'd be a
prove
bonus.
that they've exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least being able to have a mock portfolio, of something, whether it's a real estate portfolio or a mock stock portfolio. Kids need to just understand the possibilities out there, that physical labor isn't the only way to make money, but also ways to budget, understanding banking systems and all of that. Our kids they leave high school without that understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Civics is a state requirement now. I would tell you, so I would hope that someday they make financial literacy a state requirement, so that way now I'm not trying to find a way, but now I'm forced to find a way.
Yeah.
To integrate it into our programming.
That's a great goal.
Absolutely.
So have you seen a financial literacy class, in any other school so far? Or that was really just a vision that you have?
It's a vision that I have had along with some other teachers and administrators. In my 4 years ago when I first got to New Bedford Voch, there was a lot of conversation around it, and for me, I thought it was a great idea. So we've been talking about it. We're continuing to try to find space in our curriculum, in our schedule, and also curriculum to tie it to. There's history, there's a space in the history curriculum, and there's a space in the math curriculum. We're trying to find the one that suits kids the most, that will be relevant for their life post-graduation. So that's something that I hope in the next 2 to 3 years we can make happen for kids. It really should happen in middle. It should happen all the way up through in high school and be embedded regularly, but it's not, because of the other focuses that we have. But in a person's life, that will be one of the most valuable things that they can learn. So I think we have to do this. We have to do this.
And so when did you learn financial literacy yourself?
Forced to learn I was lucky enough where my father made me get a passbook, a bank passbook.
What is that?
Yeah. So I'm a little older. So it was a bank book. So when you would go and put money in the bank, a savings account, I haven't done this in a long time, so I'm probably going to hack this up. I was probably 12 when I got this passbook account for New Bedford Credit Union. And I think he gave me $50 to put in it. And then I would put $20, I don't know, a month or something from raking leaves or cutting grass.
Sure.
And I would go in there and I'd put $20 into the account, and then they would stamp it with the amount that was put in there, and then it would say what the total is. So I'd be able to watch it grow on paper. Now it would be digitized, right? It's just an account.
Yeah.
But that passbook allowed me to see the progress of that account, so that I was young, and thankfully my father exposed me to that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until later on when my wife and I began to start our family, and we had an apartment. I was 19, she was 22, and we're starting our family, and paying that first mortgage, paying that first gas bill, those lights, and my son's diapers, and you have to really figure out how to budget from week to week, month to month to make it work. And if you don't do it that way, you'll find yourself not being able to pay certain bills by the end of the month.
Yeah.
So I learned that pretty quickly. I think that came along the way in some of my math classes and the vocational, some of the vocational courses that I learned in high school to help me kind of situate my mind to have established that well as young as I was. I'm still surprised at the system that I used then that I still use today.
Really?
But I would love for kids to not have to be surprised by that the way I was.
Yeah.
But instead be prepared for it. And so, yeah, that's where I, as a 19-year-old, hit in the face with reality, having to, manage our family's finances, as my wife and I work together to raise our family.
And luckily, that's still at a pretty young age. And so you're able to learn that young and implement that through your 20s where, a lot of people who don't have to get an apartment or for whatever reasons don't learn that until later on. And so I still feel like that was relatively young, and so that was great for you.
And I would say just as a message to parents, from my experience, I was lucky enough, my father took me to, get a passbook account. My wife and I have done the same thing for our 3 kids. And I would just say to any parent, take that trip to the bank and just open up an account, $5, $10, and just go through the process with your kids so they can see that.
Yeah.
So there, you ease the intimidation around going into a bank and going through that process. Exposure is one of the best things you can do to ease the trepidation around anything.
Because you're so right. There is an intimidation to just from the unknown, period.
Sure.
Okay.
100%.
And so my dad introduced an ATM card to me and my brother early, okay? Where now, I mean, that's second nature. I mean, we've always had a debit card at this point, like in middle school.
Right.
So I'm really grateful for that. But a lot of people, even my age, didn't have a debit card until a lot later in their life, or even a credit card, because they just felt more comfortable dealing with cash. That was a system that they weren't familiar with.
Right.
And so, yeah, that intimidation factor, the sooner we address that, the better off they'll be, down the line.
100%. Exposure. As parents, we have that ability to expose our kids. So, absolutely.
And so, when you picture financial literacy, yes, budgeting, investing is huge. Do you see a place for learning about real estate? I had the pleasure of interviewing a real estate agent by the name of Brandon Burke, who's a couple years older than me, and all that information was totally new. I mean, I'm lucky enough to still live with my family, and I haven't had to buy my own place, but I feel like that knowledge would still be useful even before. Like you said, you shouldn't be surprised by all these things. So do you see a place for learning real estate in that financial literacy class?
I see a place for how to mortgage a loan, right? How to attain a car payment. There's so many things that would be part of that curriculum.
Sure.
But paramount would be a home, because that's one of the biggest purchases that any person makes in their life.
Yes.
Any person makes in their life, and imagine the investment potential if you understand real estate. But on the personal level, to raise a family, I think you're doing a couple of things. You're first of all showing them the process, again, easing that intimidation factor, the understanding of it. For some kids, you're breaking a cycle of poverty, getting them to understand that, yeah, I can own a house.
Yeah.
Now, the first barrier I have to break is how. How? Like, so if you're teaching me and showing me the way through this process, then yeah, if you're showing me different programs that I could possibly attain and be a part of to get a home, those are ways that we can sort of open the door and break the cycle for kids, as well as teaching them about the whole process. So I think it would be very important and quintessential to have that as part of it, 100%. There's so many possibilities. My brain's flooding with them.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the first things that a kid does is buys a car.
Yes.
You know, some kids are lucky enough to buy a car outright, but oftentimes we have to get a loan. What's that like? What's that process? What's an interest rate?
Yeah.
Grown-ups don't know what an interest rate really is.
Yeah.
They just know you need credit to have a low one. It's just, so what does it mean? What does credit mean?
Yes.
How do I establish credit? Those questions kids have like you wouldn't believe.
No, yeah,
and to have an adult that understands that and can walk them through it, you're just making them a more viable, ready youngster for the world. That it just goes without saying. It's so necessary, vital.
Yes.
We have to have it.
Almost as necessary as like the behavioral, you know, learning that we give to our kids too. 100%. You know, like it really goes hand in hand. You know, how to make them a kind human, but also a functioning adult.
Yeah,
yes.
And I also think about the class itself. Like if you're a teacher planning a lesson for that, you can make it so relevant and interesting for a kid, because they can literally, you know, tailor it to what a kid would want. So we're talking about cars that day, how to get a loan for a car. You can literally search the car you want. Yeah. And now you own that.
Tangible.
A kid owns that. Yeah, it's more engaging for the kid. Home, you pick out the home you want. You want that home? Guess how much you have to have, how much you have to be making. You can really put a kid in the driver's seat and open up their lens to see the big picture in life through some of the lessons that you can do around that. So, and the thing is that I don't, like my vision that's broader around a personal or personal finance course or financial literacy courses. I wouldn't want to just see it at New Bedford Voc. I'd want to see it everywhere. So absolutely. I really think the state should consider some expectations around it. You know.
No, that's a great way to put it, and a good goal for our state to have to make it a statewide requirement.
Right.
So moving more towards teachers and admin and things that you have to deal with. Okay. So first, can we talk about parent involvement?
Sure.
Okay. How vital do you see parent involvement, and has it waned in the years that you've been an educator, or have you seen a shift? Talk a little bit about parent involvement.
Yeah, I would love to. I'll open up initially by thanking all the parents.
Sure.
Being a parent is not hard. It's not an easy job.
Yes.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And so what kids need these days is profound, especially around mental health needs and just the cost of living going up, the stress that families have to make sure kids have what they need. You know, kids need Jordans, they need all these excessive, you know, things, and that's a lot. It's a lot of stress. Christmas, all of those things that families want to make sure they do perfectly for their kids. And so, you know, they also really care about their kids' education. I think what's really important for people to know is that it's not, there's always this assumption, oh, those parents don't care. It's like, well, those parents might be working full-time, multiple jobs. And so that's why we don't see them during open house. And that's why we don't see them after school, you know, at certain events, because they just need to support the family. So parent involvement, to me, I don't think has changed in that way. I think there's always, parenting is based on their availability to be a part of their kids', you know, education, I feel like in a lot of cases.
Sure.
And then what we have now, though, what I would say, the shift, we're going to talk about a shift.
Yeah.
I would say there's a shift of families that are very involved, very, very involved, and I think there's a lack of trust from families with the school. I'm going out on a limb and saying what I'm about to say.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Just know it's for the love of education, but I feel like I always have this wish that families would trust the schools a little more. And I think that, you know, with student behaviors, students don't act the same way in school as they do at home.
I can vouch that it's totally true. Yes.
Like I need families to know that.
Yes.
Like if I've called or an assistant principal's called or a teacher is called to say that Johnny or Jane has been acting this way in class, they probably really have been, even though you don't think that they have been, because they don't act that way at
No,
home.
not my Johnny.
Yeah. And I say that with absolute respect, but kids are around their peers. They are around, so boys are around. There's all kinds of stimulus going on for youngsters in a school environment that makes them act differently than what a parent is used to.
Absolutely.
And so it would be so helpful if teachers could just trust us, and parents could just trust and support that, and reinforce the messages that we're trying to send to the kid. And like, we could really do a lot more with the kids and having them make better decisions. But I think what happens is if the kid's going to defend themselves, and the parent's going to take their side, and the kid doesn't end up learning the way to behave in the way that they should. Because there isn't that support from the parent side of things. And I will tell you, 15 years now I've been an administrator, that certainly is shifting to be more of the case than ever.
And why do you think that is?
Yeah,
because you're totally right. I noticed that too. So many people do.
That's the thing, and it's a plea. It's not helpful to kids. It's reinforcing poor behaviors. That may come back to bite the parent, but it's certainly going to come back to bite the kid when they're in the workforce, interacting with other peers, adults. It's going to bite them in the rear. I can promise that. But the why is, I have my thoughts on it. I think that we're in an environment right now in our country. I think we're lucky to live in a democracy. We are. I think the idea of I'm going to do what I want because it's my right has taken on an extreme level.
Yes.
It's at an extreme level.
Great way to put it.
And I think that, I want everyone to exercise their rights, their democratic rights. But we also, I think the good thing about a democracy is that you're guaranteed levels of safety and interacting with people in an appropriate way. And that's what we're trying to get kids to do. The democracy thrives when we're all cooperating.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And so what we're trying to do in the educational environment is get kids to cooperate. And so if we have to, discipline them or have a hard conversation, it's not because we don't like them. It's because I'm trying to teach you the way to interact and cooperate the best with people. Kids their frontal lobe is not fully developed. They're just learning. So if we don't teach them, we're not helping them. We're literally doing a disservice, an absolute disservice. To endorse it, to make excuse for it, it's an impediment. I'm vehemently speaking to this point that it's not helpful.
Yes.
So that's my plea and my point on that. And I would just love to see a little bit more trust and support in getting our kids to be, the best versions of themselves as they possibly can be. So.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah. I hope our audience does too.
Absolutely. I'm sure you will.
It's real.
No,
it's all love.
And this is a man who, like I said, is a longtime educator, and especially in New Bedford. And he prides himself in being a role model and a successful teacher to these kids. And he wouldn't have the positions he would have if he didn't know what he was talking about.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And so if you can talk to, but now moving away from parent involvement, what is something that is a stressor for teachers and the administration that people might not expect right now in 2025?
So again, student behavior is one, but I'm not going to go deep into that. A lot of times teachers do a good job at setting the tone, and sometimes it can be difficult setting the tone. But some of the bigger stressors are for teachers, and if any teacher's watching this is going to say, yeah, you're at fault for this, William. So, but I'll admit, when we try new programs, when we roll out new initiatives, that can be a source of anxiety for teachers. That's a lot. And it can be a source of anxiety for administrators. And so, when a teacher has been implementing a system for quite some time, effectively, to be asked to try a different program or a system because maybe the school's not doing well or what have you, it can be a major point of frustration for teachers. And I would say over the years that I've been in administration, that seems to be the one that stresses and frustrates teachers the most. A new initiative, especially if the initiatives change regularly. Some school systems You get a new initiative every 2 years. And that's where teachers end up really losing faith in the whole system.
Sure.
You know, and you get that level of jadedness. But I think if you can roll out some initiatives, you know, methodically and thoughtfully with teachers in mind, I think you bear more fruit that way, you know, and I've done both. I'm guilty of rolling them out too fast and not considering teachers, and I take my hits for that. But I think these days what I try to do is be a lot more paced in rolling out some of the initiatives and all of that. And that's difficult because there are a lot of really best practice out there. And just take AI. So we have a lot of new AI platforms, and that's a whole territory.
I bet.
That has a variety of comfort around certain teachers, depending on what generation you're in or what have you. But, you know, the pace to get there, at least with the understanding of AI and then the application of it, I think is important that we're moving at least a step, if not a light jog, because our kids are already there. They're past it. And if we're preparing kids for the world of work or the university of tomorrow, we have to be teaching them these platforms and how to apply them.
Sure.
You know, so because they're in the careers and they're also in the universities and they're in, you know, the professional white collar and blue collar jobs. You know, so.
And so we're nearing the end of this episode, and I would want to keep talking for so much longer. We have so much to talk about, and you've been an amazing guest. So thank you for being here.
Appreciate that.
And so my last question is talking about a platform for a possible school committee member. Okay, so you've been in education for so long now. You're the principal of Voch. What are some platforms you would want the school committee, who's really the highest level of education in the city, right? Or level of, yeah, that's probably the best way to put it, okay? What would you hope that they could start to implement in order to start to see some positive changes in your school?
So I guess maybe we can narrow it down. So we have a school committee at New Bedford Voch, and then I am a father of a student in New Bedford Public.
Yep.
So we talking about New Bedford Public, or you want me to speak generally?
Generally, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as a platform for school committee, if you know, running for a school committee as a school committee member, you know, I really think that I think that it would be wise to formulate a platform that focuses on being a steward of resources for students, right? Being a steward of resources for students, in which you would be a school committee member that would be willing to take the time to understand the initiatives that the superintendent, that the district is interested in adopting. You know, in a school committee, you'll listen to the superintendent talk about, you know, this is an initiative I want to roll out because this is what the data is showing me. So what now, right? Whether it's about an instructional programming or reading programming for our K through 8 kids, you know, whether it's a behavioral program for PBIS, whatever it might be, taking, you know, being that school committee member who's willing to listen, but also do the research around some of the policies that you will enact, being that that's your role, to enact policy. You know, I think that the constituency wants to know that you're going to really understand the issues and not be a rubber stamp. I feel like that's what I hear a lot from constituents. You know, this person is just a rubber stamp. I'm just speaking generally here.
What do you mean by rubber stamp?
So, you know, a superintendent is certainly working with their school committee so that the school committee understands the initiatives, understands the budget that the superintendent wants to set for the district, the initiatives that the superintendent wants to set for the programming in the district, and I would say that you want to work closely with that superintendent wants to work closely with the school committee so that way they are fully understood and aware of what the plans are, you know, for the district. But as a school committee member, I think you want to be able to not scrutinize it, but hold them sort of accountable and ask the right questions.
Sure.
So that way all of those things are moving in the right direction, because if you don't have the right questions or appear to have the right questions, if you don't understand the matters on the agenda or at hand that well, but you're voting yay every time, you'll be considered a rubber stamp to the constituency.
Sure.
And so I'm not saying you should have a nay randomly just to show that you're not a rubber stamp. But I think being able to really show that you understand the content, you're going to be an active school committee members is what people who vote for you want to see.
Yes.
So platform, I mean, as a platform, you can talk about wanting to ensure that the disciplinary action systems are really strong so parents have faith that kids are going to be safe. Like, that's a great platform.
Sure.
Ensuring that the reading programming for kids in K through 6 or K through 5 is really solid so they have a great foundation into middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want that as a platform. But I also know that just continuing to let your folks know that you're going to be an active, school committee member who really wants to bring some accountability to the district in a supportive way.
Absolutely.
Not in I gotcha, but I want to help grow you.
Absolutely.
Then I think that's what they want to hear, and that's a more, not coarse, but a stronger way to put it, I think. But it's what I think people want, an authentic, transparent system. And people get that through the school committee. The district works through the school committee. And so I think, those three things are what I would say. Letting your constituents know that you're going to be an active, participant in the initiatives. I'm not in charge of them, but I want to understand them if that's something we're going to be voting on.
Sure.
The budget, I want to understand that if that's something we're going to be voting on. And then focusing on understanding like what the educational programming is and is it effective? A school committee member, I don't think it's over the top to be in a school committee meeting where a new reading program or a new math program is being presented to you and you happen to have some information on how another district may have rolled that out. And you happen to just kind of have that conversation about what worked and what didn't in other districts and how are we going to sort of, be able to maneuver some of the cons that they had in their district. I think that's the kind of dialogue that a constituency wants.
Sure.
So, yeah, I may or may not have answered that on the particular platform. But I
great
guess,
examples.
And here's what I want to contextualize.
Please.
I believe that a school committee member running on a platform is interesting because it's actually the school district who sets initiatives and makes the plan for how a district is going to be run.
Sure.
It is the school committee that approves that.
Sure.
Or not.
Okay.
Right? And so I think it's super important for a school committee member to respect and develop trust for their superintendent and hold them accountable where necessary.
Yeah.
So as a resident of New Bedford, I think it's important for a school committee member to just be prepared to convince me as the resident that you're willing to hold the superintendent and the district accountable by asking the right questions and doing the research.
Yeah.
That would be enough for me to understand if that was your platform,
Absolutely.
If you were running, if one was running for school committee, that's as a parent with my parent hat on.
Yes, yeah.
So.
Wally, thank you for having this interview.
Of course, thank you.
Or as a lot of people probably know you, Mr. Williams.
Indeed,
right?
yes.
And so this has been Wake Up New Bedford. I'm Marcus Coward, and you can catch us on the next episode. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.
I'm running.